Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about the lead guitar section, so let's get straight into that now. Okay, let's have a look at this guitar. Now I say guitar, it's obviously a synth guitar, but we can try and model it in some respects. The important thing I would say when you're using a synthesized guitar is not trying to emulate a real electric guitar too much, because the guitar itself is such a dynamic instrument. It reacts to the way that it's being played so much that it's very difficult to do it convincingly, super convincingly with a synth. I mean, you can get close, but only try and get close, I would say. Like, for example, the guitarist, he can pluck a string, he or she can pluck a string with their right hand or left hand if they're left-handed. But what the fret hand does as well has an impact on the sound. So you can do hammer-ons and pull-offs. So you can pluck a string, or you can whack it with your left hand if you're right-handed. You can whack a string with your fret hand and kind of pluck the string off with your left hand as well, your fret hand. And that's when you get the air guitar special. And we can emulate that somewhat, but it's never going to sound exactly the same. It's always going to sound a little bit more static. So bear that in mind. And I haven't tried to go too far with the guitar here. So in terms of the patch itself, let me just turn all these effects off. So it's fairly similar. Oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Yeah, so we've got a single saw wave here. I've actually got 4 voices slightly detuned. Obviously, that's nothing like the way a real guitar works, but it's just happened to work in this patch for me. And I've got it running through the Korg filter. Let me just switch off. The only effect I've got, obviously, this high gain amp. We'll have a look at that in a second. But I've whacked up the filter drive, so we're going to start distorting straight away. That is nice. And then we're turning on the high gain. It's in the distortion section here. So the high gain distortion switched on, driven very hard. We've got the tone set halfway, but the cabinet is also on as well. So the way that guitar works, guitar plugs into a distortion pedal, usually. Distortion pedal plugs into the amp plugs into the cabinet, which is the speaker. And each of these elements has an impact on how the guitar sounds. So if you are using a real guitar that's completely clean and dry, that's what you kind of want to try and emulate in software. If I turn the cab off, that's what a guitar would kind of sound like going into the amplifier. Then the speaker itself, you know, speakers have a certain color, especially guitar amps. That kind of thing. Then in terms of effects, I've got this going into a delay, Ableton delay, which is my favorite. Tal chorus, it's not doing a lot. It's fairly dry. It's just smushing it a little bit. That's the word I'm going to use, smush. Just slightly. And then it's being slightly compressed. And then I'm doing my double EQ trick. There's quite a lot of in the mid-lows I didn't like. And just bear in mind all these little EQ settings we're looking at throughout this course, what I'm taking out and where. It just so happened that a lot of these sounds I was using had some stuff to take out in the mid-lows, but you wouldn't always do that by default. So yeah, we're going into those 2 EQs. And then in terms of sends, we're going into the big look at here, this one and this one. We're going into the Galactic Choral Hall and the vocal reverb. And really, this is as much a mixing thing as anything else. The level and type of reverb you use is going to place this guitar in the track. And this can be quite tricky because we've already got quite a lot going on. I chose not to drop out the lead in the background. But in the video we talk about mixing, we'll have a look at what I did with it. So overall, we have that big 80s style sound. Now, in terms of MIDI, if we look at the clip here, there's nothing amazing going on with the notes themselves. They're all fairly straightforward. It was partially played in and then partially programmed in. These sections here where I've tried to emulate the hammer-on. I ain't going to be playing that. Not in time, anyway. I haven't used any velocity because nothing in the patch I programmed is velocity sensitive. But one thing to note is that I programmed and played the notes in first, but then if we come into the envelope section, I've actually got pitch bend and the mod wheel, which I recorded in afterwards. So if we look at this little plus symbol here, MIDI arrangement overdub, what this allows you to do is it allows you to keep the MIDI information that's already there, but record in more MIDI information over the top. So I've played it through and I've used these mod wheels and pitch bend wheels after recording the MIDI information. So that's a note. If I increase the pitch bend or decrease it, you get that kind of thing that guitarists do. So with their fret hand, they can bend the strings. And if you imagine a string being straight and then being bent, it's going to change in pitch as it's bent. But then I've also assigned the mod wheel to a vibrato that's built into the patch itself. So if we look at the mod matrix, LFO1 here is modulating the pitch. We've only got one oscillator, even though I've chosen all. So it modulates the pitch, but if we come over to the left here, the mod wheel is modulating the LFO1 depth. All right, not a lot. So this pitch vibrato won't happen until I use the mod wheel. Nothing. Have a look at the mod wheel down here. So the more I increase the mod wheel, the more of that vibrato we get. So that's what I've done with the MIDI clip itself. So that's our modulation wheel recorded in, and that's our pitch bend recorded in. So I've done it manually. And then the last thing I want to look at is, let's just go back to notes. I want to have a look at these hammer-ons. So if we solo this again, it's all fairly standard around here. But then looking at these notes here, these are entered in 30-second notes. Even though my resolution is set to 16th, I swapped it out to 30-second notes. Now, a real guitarist is never going to do it this perfectly. But because we're using a synth, I thought, well, I'm going to leave it perfect because I don't want to try and sound too much like a guitarist, because this doesn't sound like a real guitar. It's close. It gives you the impression of a real guitar, but it's not close enough to convince anybody really. So I've left it in really rigid. Let me rephrase that. And all I've done is I've used the chords that we're using in the track, and then I've just increased it using an inversion. So if I'm, for example, doing C major, C, E, G, then I go E, G, C, G, C, E. So it's the same notes, but the bottom note's being pulled up an octave. The next bottom note's being pulled up an octave. So it just makes it a little bit more interesting. So it's a combination of trying to do the air guitar thing, the hammer-on and pull-offs, and the pitch bend and the vibrato all build up to help convince you that this is a guitar-like sound. But, you know, if you've listened to any kind of real guitars for any length of time, it ain't going to convince you 100%. And that's pretty much it for the guitar. It's kind of starting off with the right sound in the first place. If you get the distortion and the cabinet, the cabinet sound, the sound of a speaker, and the way lead guitars are usually recorded is with a microphone up against the speaker. So you don't realise just how much of that element of the sound is telling you that this is a guitar. It's not just the guitar itself, it's the whole recording chain. That's what you're used to listening to. So that's why we try and emulate it in the software as well. So I think next thing we're going to look at is mixdown and automation. And there's a reason why I'm going to place them together. So I'll see you there.